Thank you. The agenda tonight, it's a really packed agenda, so we're going to try not to rush people, but there's a lot to cover. We have an hour and a half. We'll do welcome. We'll talk about the RFP process, what exactly we're talking about tonight. We'll look at some of the past plans and some of the planning that's going on to date. We'll look at a market overview for the corridor, and then we'll delve into what we're calling opportunity sites, sites that could potentially be redeveloped on the corridor in the RFP. And that's really the bulk of what we'll talk about this evening. We will do small group breakout sessions just because there's such great turnout tonight, which is excellent. And then we'll talk about key takeaways and talk about next steps. So we're really excited to be here, and I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. So thank you. So the team to start is City of Chicago Department of Planning and Development. My name is Erica Selke. I'm the lead planner for the Far South region. Jasmine, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Gunn. I'm a planner with the Far South region as well.
And Michael Pennisnack.
Hi, my name is Michael Pennisnack. I am also a planner with the Far South region.
And Gerardo is going to join us. He's our Deputy Commissioner for Planning and Design. So he'll join in a bit. And really critical to the project is the Chicago Central Area Committee. They're the group that put together the team that we're working with tonight, and everyone working on this outside of the city is working pro bono, which is really great. Kelly, who led this, is now working in a different city, but we wanted to show her name here. Nira, are you here? Did you want to say a few things?
To the data power or
so sorry. Hi, I'm the new assistant manager for CCAC, and I'm really excited to see this project go forward and work with the community.
Great, thank you, Nira. And then I will turn it over to Matt Dumich of Smith Group to walk through the pro bono consultant team that we have on board. Matt.
Hello, everyone. Nice to join you this evening. Matt Dumich. I'm an architect and principal at Smith Group. I think rather than introduce our large team, who some of them will be sharing the presentation with us today, I'll just give a shout out to our teammates. So Smith Group is leading the team, the planning, the architecture, and urban design. We're joined by Sterling Bay as a development advisor. SB Friedman is a market analysis consultant, I should say. And then Solomon Cordwell-Benz is a transportation advisor on the team. And I will note that SCB is also working on the Red Line extension. So they're a great liaison to our team. Thanks, Erica.
Sure, thank you. So we go to the next slide. Okay, Invest Southwest. So this is an initiative that the mayor put in place a little over a year ago. And the real goal of Invest Southwest is to pool the money, private money, public money on the south and west sides of Chicago, where there has historically been a lot of disinvestment and non-investment in the area. So how do we focus on these really important neighborhoods in Chicago and bring more development potential and investment and build community wealth is also a really critical piece of this in these neighborhoods. So the mayor is looking to put $750 million in public funding over 3 years into the neighborhoods you see on the map. So the greater Roseland area is circled there with the red. So it's really the community areas of Roseland, Pullman, and West Pullman that we're looking at there. And then you can see there are a number of other neighborhoods as well on the south and west sides. So we're really looking to amplify local assets. There's so many great things in the community already. How do we push that forward? Drive private investment to build local wealth. Focus public investments to support local priorities, and then integrate all these ideas with new strategies for public safety. So we can go to the next. So in Roseland, in the greater Roseland area, the priority corridor is Michigan Avenue from 110th Street down to 116th Street. And then it also includes a portion of 111th Street over to Wentworth. So we've been doing a lot of engagement in the area, including with the organizations and people and business owners that you see listed here. Go to the next. So the goals for today are to gather your input. What do you envision for this corridor? And then also sort of drilling down, looking at different development possibilities for key sites along the corridors and talking about what types of new amenities and businesses are needed, and also identify programming needs and different economic development strategies. So with that, I believe I'll turn it over to Michael Pennisnack. Michael?
That is correct. Yes. Hi. Again, Michael Pennisnack. So as part of Invest Southwest, we are doing RFPs. RFPs are requests for proposals that the city releases to ask developers to propose projects for us, generally with city-owned land, but sometimes privately owned land or buildings. In the past, these have been very bare bones documents with, just size, zoning, and a minimum price. Under the leadership of Mayor Lightfoot and Commissioner Cox, our Invest Southwest RFPs are a different kind of document. These RFPs are going to include the types of financial incentives that can help facilitate development, the desired type of density, the history of your community, past planning exercises, and the market to best guide developers. That isn't to say that the documents won't have the zoning and so on, but they're now going to include a much more detailed description of the kinds of uses that you, the community, want to see. So on the next slide, there is something I cannot stress enough. RFPs are not a plan for the site in question. Any drawings that you see today or any drawings that you see in the final RFP when we release that are meant to tonight to guide conversation, and in the RFP to help shape the responses so that they best represent what you, the community, want to see. I also want to point out you will have a chance to review the finalists once everyone responds to the RFP, which we anticipate is going to be July, August. So on the next slide, why change how we do our RFPs? We have 3 goals. We want to facilitate design excellence in Greater Roseland. We want to use inclusive decision-making processes to guide economic development. And we want to build local wealth in Roseland. So on the next slide, you will see the RFP release schedule. This is our 3rd round of these. In under a year, we've managed to release these for all of our Invest Southwest priority areas. The plan is that the city will continue to release RFPs on a quarterly basis in the future. In 2021, on the timeline, that's when we'll be evaluating the proposals. We will enter negotiations and preparations in 2022, and the construction for the project will begin second half of that year. So our release schedule for the past month, DPD and our pro bono partners have been talking with various stakeholders. Tonight is our community visioning workshop. From here, I will begin the process of taking this to our Community Development Commission. On the 23rd, I hope you guys can make, we will be having a roundtable meeting where I'll review what I presented to Community Development Commission. And then at the end of March is when we anticipate that we'll be releasing the RFPs with a due date right now scheduled for June.
Hi, so I'm just going to talk about the current and upcoming and ongoing planning that's happening in the area, and just so we're aware of what's going on and how this kind of fits into this process. So as you can see in the orange, that's the Invest Southwest Corridor. One big thing that I've been working with is with CTA on their red line extension planning and their transit supported development comprehensive plan. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the station area meetings that have just been happening these previous 4 weeks. And they're going to have continuous and ongoing community engagement around that planning process. Another big thing to mention is the Roseland Medical District plan. That planning process, we are in the stages of selecting the planning consultants. And so there'll be some community planning around the Roseland Medical District as well along 111th Street. And then what's listed here are just some other plans that are happening, but those are the most pressing. The other one I do want to mention as well is the LIST Quality of Life plan that's happening for the far south side in Chicago as well. And then one big thing to bring up is the historic preservation study. So in the fall of 2020, last year, we hired McGuire and Nagleski to do some background research on baseline historical information on Michigan Avenue to develop strategies to improve Michigan Avenue and different historic preservation strategies. That study is still ongoing, and any decisions we make around historic preservation strategies will come as a result of continued community engagement. So just be on the lookout, because there will be continued community engagement around this issue of historic preservation of Michigan Avenue. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Rana from Smith Group.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Rana Lee with Smith Group. And as Jasmine mentioned, we have been talking to several of you in conversations to understand what the corridor stood for back in the day when it was the Avenue, and how that has changed and how might that inform where the future is headed, right? So based on some very, really fabulous conversations that myself and my colleagues have had, I just wanted to share kind of what we've heard. This isn't everything, but simply the things that came up a lot. So we can't talk about moving forward without understanding where we are today. And lots of community members have some concerns, and they evolve around loitering, crime, and a variety of different crimes. From a business owner point of view, they'd like to see more foot traffic. Currently, there's no to low. There's also some discussion about the speed at which people travel or they drive down Michigan Avenue. And then lastly, they want to make sure that whatever we create collectively in the community, that there's enough meaningful momentum for that change to keep on going. In terms of what the community might want to see in terms of programmatic use, there's no surprise here. So a variety of local neighborhood-based retailers to address community needs, dining, and a whole variety of food service. And then things to do. There might be entrepreneurial studies, training, multi-generational gathering. And then we ask the question about what sort of experience would you want people to have on the corridor? And there is a lot of pride that the community has on what the corridor represented, and the desire to bring back placemaking, branding, preservation, as well as restoration of existing architecture. And then most importantly, attractive storefronts and streetscape. So right now there's a lot of concern about the vacant lots and keeping those aesthetically really pleasing to add to the pedestrian experience. So what we did is took a quick look at the market overview in terms of the demographic analysis, and this helps us really understand the unique characteristics of a community's population, and also helps us identify shifts that have happened that we might want to consider in looking at the corridor here. So I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but I think there's two really key messages here. One is that, you know, between 2000 and 2016, the overall Roseland population decreased by 20%, whereas, you know, the city metropolitan area was averaging about 6%. So, you know, when you got a decline like this, it's going to have a ripple effect in the community's economic outlook. And the other thing I want to point out is when you look at the age of residents in the Roseland area, 18% are 65 years or older. And with that percentage of aging residents, you know, we want to think about what are their implications on future healthcare needs for that population set and for the broader community. Okay, so here we're taking a look at employment. And the chart on the left looks at employment opportunities, so jobs that are available within Roseland. On the right-hand side, that shows people who live in Roseland, where do they go to work and what type of sectors they might be in. So I'm going to focus two things on the left-hand chart. And again, that focuses on what are the job opportunities available in Roseland. So you've got three employers who make up the top two at least, you know, so obviously you've got Roseland Community Hospital, the high school in the area, and then adjacent Chicago State University on 95th Street. The other thing that I want to point out is a majority of the residents who live within Roseland work outside of the area. And so only 7% of the residents who actually live in Roseland work in Roseland. Next map. And lastly, I just want to share a little bit about the housing stock. So on the whole, if you simply look at numbers, Roseland consists largely, and not say largely, but majority of single family units. And there's an interesting trend here. When we start looking at when homeowners became homeowners, 25% of residents have lived in the community for 40 years or longer. And so this demonstrates this, you know, long-standing connection to the community and stability as well as well-being. The flip side of that is when you start looking at the age of the housing stock, 74% of the housing stock, whether that is single family or multifamily, is 60 years old, if not older. So again, something to consider as we start designing the corridor.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Taft Cleveland. I'm also with Smith Group. This is an overview of the Michigan corridor that you see in the center. But what I wanted us to focus on is just as we move forward, we can see that there's the CTA Red Line extension that's coming in the future with stops on 111th Street as well as 116th Street. But we also are looking at the Pullman National Monument that's coming very soon, and we're anticipating over 300,000 visitors per year. So this gives us a context of what's going on around Roseland and how we can improve. And as we look at the area that we can see around the corridor along Michigan Avenue, you see a lot of assets that we have surrounding the community. And so this gives us a little bit of understanding of what your needs may be. And so we're in a great position to listen to you today and to find out what those needs could be so that we can improve the corridor. And then as we look along the corridor between 111th Street and 115th Street, we recognize the rich historical that's the rich history that's going along the corridor, whether it's with the signage or with the building stock that you have. And so we're anticipating looking at how we can improve those, as well as looking at ways and to connect from not only the 111th Street, but also to the potential future red line that's coming just south of 115th Street. And then as we zoom in a little closer and looking at the sites, we recognize that there's a variety of different land uses that are along the corridor. And so as we move forward, we want to highlight some of the vacant lands that we see on the next slide. So the next slide, we can actually see there's a lot of potential that we can see with those bright red, orange sites, so that we can look at ways and how we can look at investment in the future. And as we look at those investments, we also see that we recognize the corridor assets. Many of us had the opportunity to go to Old Fashioned Donuts and to walk up and down the corridor. And so we're excited to learn more about what your needs are so that we can address those along the corridor. And I'll turn it over to Janet.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janet Atarian with Smith Group. So obviously, a lot of this has to do with the street itself and that relationship between the street and the surrounding buildings. And the great part about Michigan Avenue in this section is that it really does have wonderful bones. It's been a thriving retail corridor for a long time. And so it was built around that great sort of walkable retail set of dimensions. The challenge, of course, is that the infrastructure has gotten very old, and it needs some love and attention. And so how do we really look at this aging infrastructure? What can we do to address issues around accessibility, making it much more pedestrian friendly, safer, more comfortable to cross the street? How can we look at issues around making access and waiting at bus and transit stops more comfortable and more friendly? But also then how can we retain some of the strong parts, like the relationship between the sort of building heights and facades and the width of the street, and really look at those things to bring everything together. And of course, we are working with CDOT to understand what kind of resources we can bring to the table to help address a lot of those issues to go along with some of the development ideas that we're going to be talking about today. Next slide. And of course, there's also some good transit access along the corridor. The good news is it's going to get better, but we still have some time before that happens. So how do we strengthen what we have out there now today? Again, as I mentioned, looking at the bus stops, making those feel more comfortable, more welcoming, safe. How do we look at the connections to the metro stations? How reasonable is it for people along this corridor to make those connections to the metro stations? What does that feel like? What does that walk feel like? Are there other ways to make that jump a little bit shorter using other modes of transportation? And then, of course, understanding the impacts of the future red line extension on the corridor, and as was mentioned, the new stops at 111th and 116th. Next slide. So this is the first sort of interactive part of the presentation. What we would like to do is if you could type a few words in the chat, which will all be memorialized, that really, if you could put in 3 words that sort of describe what you hope Michigan Avenue will be in 10 years. So, it could be 1 words or some phrases. So is it active? Is it small business supportive? Is it clean, safe, pedestrian friendly, walkable, you know, what are a couple of words that would really sum up for you what you hope? Yeah, culturally rich, all sorts of great things. I'm seeing some interesting ones come in already. So if you could put some words in, we'd really appreciate it. This is going to help us pair some of those existing conditions that Rana talked about and some of the things we heard with how that translates into sort of the larger vision. And we know there's a lot of great discussion that you guys have been having on this, and we will continue to have. And so I think we're going to jump into a little bit around the development while everyone's doing that, but feel free to keep adding, take your time. If you need to, you can keep doing it throughout this presentation.
Great, thank you, Janet. Yeah, and we see some great examples in the chat. Take a look. Restored, culture, small business, revitalized, historic site, tourist site, small business destination. So thank you, please keep adding. So I'm going to take a look at the sites that we're going to look at today. So given all of the information we went over in terms of land use, vacancy, we're going to talk about 3 different sites on the corridor. So for this RFP, what we're looking for when we're thinking about a site is what can make a really big impact. You know, what is one thing that if we pool resources into it, it'll make a dramatic difference on the corridor. So we're looking at a site that can provide that sort of shot in the arm for the corridor. The other thing we took into consideration are city-owned lots versus privately owned properties. So city-owned lots, of course, are much easier for us to put into an RFP because the city controls them, so we can put them up for offer. But there are a couple examples of existing buildings and also privately owned vacant sites, notably the GATELY'S site, that if we worked with the owner, potentially they would be willing to either sell their business or sell the building or be able to be part of the new development. The other thing we're looking at is funding sources. So for housing, we'll have to look at the different affordable housing incentives there are. So for example, and I don't fully understand them. Luckily, we have very smart people at Department of Housing who does, but there are different tax credits and also 9% tax credits and different financing options. So in order to meet some of those options to get money through affordable housing, you need a minimum number of units. So in order to go through the full process to be able to get those credits, generally, Department of Housing has told us you need at least 50 units in a building to make it worthwhile to get that funding. So that's one of the things we're looking at as well. What sites can hold 50 units if we want housing on the site? And then also looking at NOF and if the building's vacant and what condition it's in. So anyway, this is all a long way to say that we looked up and down the corridor at the available sites and felt that the 3 we're presenting tonight offer the most opportunity to be a successful RFP at the end of the day. And while we're talking about 3 sites now, we are going to focus on 1 for the final RFP. So we won't make that decision tonight, but I did just want to sort of lay out our thinking, our background thinking here. So if you could go to the next slide, we'll focus in on the sites. So the first is the old GATELY'S People site. So this is one we looked at just because it's big. It's one of the biggest sites along the corridor that can make a big impact. The city owns half of it. And also it's on a corner. So that's, developers usually like having a corner site so that they have two focal points of their building. And then some of the other ones are the Roseland Theater building, which is an iconic building along the corridor, and the city owns a large vacant parcel adjacent to that. So yes, thank you, Matt. So this is something where we could redevelop the theater building and then also build new construction next to it. And then finally, there's site number 3, which is at 114th Place. And this again is a solely city-owned parcel. So again, the city would control it, which makes it a bit easier to do an RFP. So these are our 3 sites, and we're going to walk through, Smith Group is going to walk through different development scenarios for each site. So we'll talk about them all. So I would just encourage people, some of what you see may be a little surprising or different than what you expected. So please just take it in, and we'll have a lot of time in the breakout sessions to talk about if you love it, if you hate it, if you want something totally different. So just sort of think about all of these things when we're walking through the sites.
Hi, everyone. My name is Smitha. I'm an architect with Smith Group. So we're going to start out by talking about what we understand to be successful potential uses for the neighborhood. We really want to reactivate the ground floor and have this be a safe and vibrant place for people once again, have it be safe and clean and bright. And these, I think, are some of the words people are even starting to type in the chat here. And then when we think about uses, we've heard from the community a need for food and more accessible food. So coming up with, is there a neighborhood scale of market that would be successful? Is there more to that food program component that involves maybe an incubator around food business, an opportunity for shared commercial kitchens? And then that even expands to the need for community space, places for gathering, to be able to ideate together and create, and then even just some of the more day-to-day needs that really need to be fulfilled in any community. So those having to do with health and wellness, medicine, and then something as basic as residential. So do we want to densify the way we think of residential development in this area? Next slide, please. So just to get into these a little bit more, have some more context for them. So here we're seeing a strong activated ground floor, I think what we already understand that Roseland once had, and just bringing back that really strong life at the ground floor. So a development that embraces that. Next slide. Understanding when we create community space, what are all of the different things that we come together for? And obviously those have changed a little, and our understanding of that has changed with the pandemic recently, but just understanding we come together to eat, to come up with ideas, to exercise, and how do we create a space that embodies all of those, or one of those, or just really creates a hub for encouraging, this gathering that can spark further development on the corridor, and that also embraces everything that's already happening on the corridor. Next slide. And then I touched briefly on the need to expand on, or I guess the opportunity to expand on the program. So on the one hand, there's the basic concept of access to food, but can we go, if we can fulfill that need, can we also go beyond and understand education around nutrition, entrepreneurship around food production, and training, the hospitality end of food as far as restaurants and cafes go. So these are some examples of precedents in Chicago that embrace that. Next slide, please. The residential component can look a few different ways, especially as we move forward looking at the different sites. So we want to create something that's really strong and timeless, and kind of can stand up with the strong history that the corridor already has. And then we're also looking at, typologies that can serve as infill and relate to what's there, and kind of maybe fill a gap on the corridor. Next slide. So Erica mentioned our 3 sites. So this slide just shows us each of these sites is an opportunity to make an impact on the corridor. Next slide. So the first site we're going to look at, as Erica mentioned, is our largest site. It does include a set of parcels on Michigan Avenue, as well as a much bigger lot just east on Edgebrook. And you could go to the next slide. So from there, when we think about what can happen, on the one example is to have a dense residential multi-unit development along Michigan Avenue above an activated ground floor. So what you're seeing in the reddish color is a ground floor activation with 3 stories of multi-unit residential that gets us to that 50 unit number that Erica mentioned earlier. And then we also just really want to respect what's already happening. A lot of this is about lending itself to understanding what's already happening. So on Edgebrook just east, there's already a beautiful residential street. And so let's support that, whether it's with townhomes or single family homes, but respecting that and having a development that brings more residences to the area. Next slide. This is just understanding that in plan, the residential component along Michigan Avenue. This is maybe a little confusing, but north is to the left here. But the residential component around Michigan Avenue can really activate it. Maybe even having a plaza or some small public gathering space on that corner, and then just seeing how we can extend and fill in the residential program that's already happening to the east. Next slide. And we're going through quite a few scenarios. So as we go through these, I'll just highlight that these are options to start our conversation. And just so please save any questions or keep any questions you have for the breakout rooms, because those will be really important for us to further understand, like, is this the right path? Is this what we want to see happening here? But there are quite a few scenarios that I'll go through here. So we're looking at the same lot, the former GATELY'S People Store. This is another residential development. But instead of wrapping the corner here, we're looking at expanding the commercial component of the program. So potentially, as we looked at, some inspirational programs as far as incubator spaces or maybe production kitchens, that's what we can extend and take advantage of on this site by having a larger commercial component. And then just keeping, the respect to the residential street beyond. And then we can see that in plan as well. So as you can see, it just ends up being a larger commercial component on the site, allowing for any loading and everything that you'd need there, but still having the dense residential along Michigan Avenue. Then our next scenario, or our next site, is the current Roseland Theater site. So this is a really,
sorry. I actually have a, we're gonna have poll questions in between each site.
Yes, thank you.
So
we'll go back.
Yeah, in response to this first site, we just want to have a poll question on what type of housing that you guys want to see along the corridor and in the neighborhood in general. And so the 3 options are single family homes. Do you want attached homes, such as townhouses or row houses? And or would you like multifamily apartments, such as senior, affordable, etc.? So I'll give you guys some moments to answer that poll. Then we'll share the results.
Thank you for interjecting, Jasmine. I was just gonna keep flying.
Okay, so we're gonna close the poll in about 10 seconds here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So it looks like the most frequent one chose was multifamily apartments. And then there was a tie between the single family homes and the townhouses, row houses. Can you guys see those results?
Yep.
You can, okay. Okay, you can go ahead, Smith, to the next one.
Okay, Thank you. So yeah, that was just our first site, and then we'll have a similar poll, I believe, at the end of our next two sites as well. So here we're looking at the site of the existing Roseland Theater, and here we definitely want to respect, you know, the symbol and the beauty that that theater has. So keeping the, actually we'll go to the next slide. So we want to respect the existing theater and look at that as an adaptive reuse potential. And then here, one option is to really expand the commercial component. Again, what types, I saw in the chat earlier, some of the things that people were asking for were, you know, startups and support for perhaps a tech hub. This could again go towards the food production component. This could go towards the incubator, another version of a larger commercial program. And then does that could act either in tandem with the existing adaptive reuse, or these could be two separate uses. So there's some opportunity there to have another sort of community center, whether that's in conjunction with the theater or separately. And this, of course, is a really fantastic option to kind of infill and also, you know, show some love to a beautiful existing structure. And then another option here, you know, looking at density with a multi-unit residential development. So having 4 floors of residential units, or 5 floors, actually, my apologies, above a ground floor activated commercial use. And then that, of course, is, again, still leaving respect to the existing building and what that could be developed into. And then, you know, understanding that from the plan view as well, another opportunity to fill in the street wall. Yeah. So I think we can do, Jasmine, is there a poll for this one as well?
Yes. So this one will speak to the type of uses that you would like to see along Michigan Avenue. So there is, the options are, oh, let me launch the polling here. So yeah, these are the types of business uses and mix that you would like to see come back along Michigan Avenue. So it's either retail stores, restaurants is the second option, it's community centers or spaces, there's shared kitchens, business incubators, that could be food, technology, arts, a variety of different types of incubators or artisan space. Yeah, so we're going to give you a few moments here to fill in this poll as well. All right, we're going to give you about 10 more seconds here. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the most common one chose is business incubators. And then the second option was restaurants, and then it was retail stores and community center spaces, and then shared kitchens was the last option. Okay, thank you guys for answering that. Smith, I'll let you go back to the last site.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. So our final site is at the corner of Michigan and 114th Place. This is our smallest site. So we're kind of looking at a small, medium, large in terms of the 3 kind of options we're looking at. Next slide. With this one, one thing that's interesting is that the site across the street, the furniture store, many of you probably know, but it's received a Neighborhood Opportunity Fund grant. And so activating this corner is, you know, kind of a great way to maybe build off of that as something of a catalyst. We're again, of course, keeping that street front as usual with the activated commercial use and filling in the street wall. And then this is obviously a pretty dense residential development. As it is a smaller site, we go a little bit taller to get to that 50 unit minimum that was mentioned earlier. And we still are looking at this massing as wanting to be respectful of what's happening around, so stepping it back as well. just to reduce the impact. And then seeing that one in plan, you know, taking up most of the site, taking advantage of all of that real estate. And yeah, that's our third option. So is there a poll question to go along with this one as well?
Yes, there is. So this one, we want to get a sense of you guys' feedback on density and height. We recognize this is a pretty tall building in relation to the rest of the corridor. So we just want to get a sense of, do you guys feel it's way too tall? You need to adjust? Do you think it could be taller? Or do you think that it's the right height in terms of just adding some more density and getting some more units and people on the corridor? So we're gonna give you guys a few more moments. All right, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so the polls show that 54% responses think it's too tall, 50% think it's about the right height, and then only 4% say it could be a little taller.
And then just in conclusion, these are the summary of the 3 sites. So for our first 2 sites, we had 2 different options, each of which looked at a larger commercial component. And then our third option, which is exploring, you know, what does extreme densification of the site look like and how could that work with the existing context? And then I believe we'll move to breakout rooms. So I'll send it back over to Erica.
Yes, thank you, Smitha and Jasmine. So we're going to go into breakout rooms. So we'll have those slides available. You can take a look at them again. We'll have someone from Smith Group and the CCAC team leading the discussion, and someone from the city should be in each room as well. In the room, we ask that people be respectful of each other's ideas and comments and speak one at a time. We'll have about 30 minutes and focus on discussion questions in the breakout rooms as well. And I see there are a lot of great questions happening in the chat box. So keep those in mind. We can talk about them a bit later, and then we can also talk about them in the rooms as well. So the next slide. I'll start the breakout rooms and you'll see this little box pop up and you join it. And if you joined like 15 minutes after the start or more, I'll put you into a room in a bit. So just give me a second to do that. So I think that's the last slide before breakout rooms. Is that right, Matt? Oh, so the discussion questions we'll be looking at. Given the development priorities shown, what are your top development priorities for these sites? Do you have a preferred building scale or program? And then what aspects of community culture priorities are missing in the things we talked about today? So with that, I am going to open all rooms and we can get talking.
I would just make one more note, which is that we will regroup here after the breakout. So hang on after your huddle with your group.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Okay.
Erica?
Yes.
Can I make a comment? I'm sorry coming in. I know you probably shouldn't interrupt. This is Mr. Gardner.
Yes, hi.
In regards to the Roseland Theater. Yeah, I'm sorry for just getting in, but they said it was good, so I'm just going. I did, but I'm just going to mute myself. You just tell me where we're going from there.
Sure. So we're going to go into different breakout rooms and have a discussion, and then we'll all come back at the end and we can talk then as well. But we'd love to hear your voice in one of the breakout rooms too. So thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
So if you'll just give me a second, I'll get Oh, whoops. Oh, gosh. Sorry. Thank you for your patience.
Hey, Erica.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good.
I was just being nosy, trying to see what's going on in the neighborhood and what
Good.
what programs and things is coming around, and see how that affected us, because we ended up finding a space to open up the cafe.
Good. Where?
107th and King Drive. So it's a little
nice.
off Michigan. So I was just trying to see like what was going on just to see.
Oh, good. Well, congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah, we're excited. They started working on it already. We're waiting on some permits. You know, Andrea Reed has been working with us. So
Oh, good.
we finally got the alderman's attention.
Oh, excellent. Oh, that makes me so happy.
Thank you, Erica, because you know you were one of the first people we talked to when we started. So, you know, I'm texting Rebecca now. She want to know everything. Like, who's there? Who's in the studio? Like, we know anybody. I said, well, he is here. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Well, it looks good.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah.
You know, the fact that you guys are bringing back the, because my mom grew up in the neighborhood as well. So like, the fact that you guys even thought about like keeping some of the arts, like the theater and things like that. Yeah. So we shall see.
Yeah, yeah. So we've had some good responses to RFPs in the other areas that we're working in. So I'm really hopeful that, you know, we'll get a good response, and it'll be sort of like a partnership between a big developer and maybe a smaller developer and people from the neighborhood. So yeah, I think it could be a really good opportunity.
I think so. You know, I think so. I can envision it. You know, it's I don't know what will be a pushback. I think. Who knows?
There's always something in the city, but
so when you think so that the Southwest grant is only going to be for Michigan?
Well, we're looking at the whole area. So it is Roseland, Pullman, West Pullman. We're giving preference to Michigan Avenue because we really want to focus all the resources there. But if there's a good project that has a good site somewhere else, we're not
in the neighborhood.
Yeah, we're not saying no.
A person should try, just, you know, not just say, oh, since it's not on Michigan.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
But that's what we wanted to know.
Great. So I'm gonna hop into another room. I'm sort of just jumping around.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon, Erica.
Okay. Thanks for coming. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Bye. Hi. Sorry, I felt so cruel closing the rooms because everyone's talking so much.
Our group, Rana and my group, was pretty quiet.
Okay.
So we're hoping that means we covered the right topics, and they'd like to hear more about what we discover.
Okay.
And then Erica, just as a reminder, would you share with the group again the availability of the recording and where that would be available? Thank you.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'm sorry, I felt so cruel hitting that close room button because I know everyone was in the middle of pretty intense conversations, which is great. I thought we could go to the different rooms. Rana, since you were out here first, do you want to go first about what was talked about in your room?
Yeah, we had some good feedback. So a couple things. In terms of the program, there was a conversation where, you know, with the medical district, Roseland Medical District coming online sometime in the future, that might make the case for residential housing on the avenue. But all in all, one of the key things that was mentioned is, you know, the need to have an active and diverse mix of programs. But there was a lot of discussion that illuminated that there is momentum already on the corridor, whether it's education or tech, entrepreneurial, and so on, and kind of continuing to see that. There was also mention of the Aldi's that was slated for 115th and Michigan. So if there were to be a grocer, something that would complement that as opposed to being a duplicate. Gerardo, I wanted to make sure, and we also talked a little bit about the aesthetic character of whatever building may come online, and that our group preferred that the exterior be highly contextual and maintain that historic look and feel about the avenue. And Gerardo, anything else you'd like to add, or we're all good?
No, you know, I think along the lines of kind of like residential uses, you kind of covered this, but this idea that not every site needed to be residential, you know, and maybe we could consider that kind of balance and thinking in the growth of the corridor. It certainly was one bit of feedback that I walked away with.
Great, thank you. Taft, do you want to go next?
Sure. We had a really diverse group from James Parker, who is has a tech entrepreneurship that's 1921, that's on South Michigan Avenue, to Regina, who was a retired police officer, to Sheila, who's a resident, and we even had people that were that's part of the CTA Red Line Extension who was just listening, because what we're talking about is going to impact their projects, as well as Debbie, who was in Pullman. Sorry, but we did talk about housing, that residential was not the priority, but it was more along the lines of gathering spaces. Those spaces that if you drove down the street, you can park your car, you can get something to eat, you can go to a cafe, you can go and buy go shopping for clothing, but something that would attract you, that you would just spend money there, and a place that would be convenient and safe for your family. So those were some of the main points, and even some of the scaling. If it was more pedestrian friendly, 1 or 2 stories that would complement the context of the neighborhood along the corridor. And even if it was a couple of setbacks that went up to maybe 3 or 4 stories, then that would be more appropriate than having something that looks like a gigantic warehouse that's on a corner, that's imposing and bringing a lot of shade onto the street. So we had a really good comprehensive list of ideas, but it's centered around family and gathering spaces.
Okay, great, thank you. Joe, do you want to go?
Smith is gonna.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Report out on from our group. Thanks.
Thank you. So our group talked about a few items, especially at the beginning, talking about understanding how is what's existing in Roseland going to be supported. So there was, I know there was a comment mentioned in the chat, and we brought this up and discussed it. There's concern about you know, vacancy in residences is already an issue in Roseland. There's a lot of housing stock that exists that needs support so that there are more places where people can live beyond just providing denser housing. Another one was the same feeling for, you know, commercial buildings. How can these be revitalized and show love outside of bringing in something new? And then also an interest in more, I think, connection of services, it sounded like. So on the one hand, people who are working really hard to uplift entrepreneurs and help them get to the next level. But then on the other hand, entrepreneurs who are looking for more support. So connection in that area. And then as far as program goes, we had some great discussions about what could be happening in these spaces. So there was interest in the idea of an incubator, whether that is for food production, the culture of food trucks that exists, and how that could be a Black tech incubator hub, to expand on that as well, because it sounds like we have some of that on the call as well, which is great. And then music was one thing that was brought up that I don't know that we had talked about before, but you know, the great thing about looking at purely commercial potential programs was how could we integrate some outdoor space for music and combine that with different music associated venues, because that exists in the neighborhood as well. And I just want to see, I think that's a good summary. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Smitha. Janet?
Yeah, so we had some interesting discussion, and I think we sort of revealed some, you know, different forces that everyone's trying to balance. So when we were looking at just the sites in general, people expressed a strong preference for the site at 112th. And really a lot of what was driving that was a couple of things. One, it was just being the biggest site, it had the opportunity to kind of create the largest street wall. And that was something that was really expressed as a priority. You know, filling the blank holes was just really important. And the more of the blank hole we can fill, that better, right? And so this idea that that's just a big site. And I think too, while people didn't maybe come out and quite say it, you know, they kept referencing its historic use, and I think just the significance of having that site filled again was something that sort of resonated with people. And they also liked the fact that you did not necessarily have to build up on that site, right? That you could build lower and bigger, so you could get your program needs, but you wouldn't have to go up as much. So I think all of that was something that really made that site stand out for folks. On the other hand, though, we had Mr. Gardner, who's the owner of the theater, in our group. And he gave us a great sort of history of his ownership of the site, the things they've tried to do, some of the challenges they have now. You know, he was very gracious about wanting to do whatever the community wanted to do the most. So he didn't say, you know, I want this site to be developed, but he talked about some of the advantages if there was a development adjacent. They have issues around accessibility. They don't have any access to the second floor, and they've used that as a sort of office co-working space. It's been an educational facility. So an adjacent development could provide an elevator that then, you know, had access to that, and that could support those needs. So, you know, we talked a lot then about this idea of the programming, and then, you know, what's driving that. And I think in general, you know, at a high level, we didn't, you know, definitely confirm one way or the other. I think people were more supportive of retail, commercial, you know, incubator uses than housing. You know, because there's just so much in the surrounding community. We had a little discussion about, is there types of housing though that are missing, and if residents on the street could possibly support the retail, since that's been a challenge. And I think there was some, which kind of brings us back a little bit to the 112th site, that this idea that you could fill a lot of storefront and focus more on retail with the Michigan Avenue piece, but add some housing on the backside, right, of that site. But that people also expressed that housing, they want to, one of the things that maybe makes some of the existing housing less appealing is when it's frame built. So having, you know, maybe brick housing or other housing that one also fits more historically in character with some of the area, and also provides sort of a more attractive housing in that way, would be something that was missing, and that could be potentially dovetail with those types of things. So I'm just checking here if I'm missing anything. Ernest, did I miss anything? People mentioned like the Target development in Hyde Park as a potential sort of example. So that's interesting because that's sort of a little different than some of those things we talked about. But I think definitely mixed use leaning towards more retail, commercial, and a little bit less towards housing was definitely an overall. But I think, I know one other thing that I thought was really important, and I think I heard it in the earlier ones too. You know, the vision is that Michigan Avenue is that retail corridor that supports this great Pullman activity that's happening, right? And I think again and again, people are returning to this idea. We want this to be the street that people come to shop on. And it should respect the historic aspect of it, so that when people are coming for historic Pullman, they also want to go shop at historic Michigan Avenue. And what does that look like?
Great, thank you, Janet. And last but not least, Matt.
Thanks, Erica. So hearing some recurring themes here, but one is a good piggyback to what Janet just shared about the Avenue. In general, positivity around the Main Street approach focus and the history. We talked a bit about whether the corridor is for tourists or for the community, and what an anchor means and what an anchor might do to drive traffic and foot traffic. There was a general consensus that just more businesses were needed in general. And a grocery store was one of the things that was mentioned. We did talk a little bit about parking and the importance to get the parking right. We also, and I think this is one that I heard from some of the other groups, talked about some kind of incubator, job training, potentially kind of community space that might be multi-generational. And one of the things I would just add to the conversation for all of you is that please talk this RFP up. I think the success of the RFP is in the quality of the proposals that are received from teams. And those teams don't have to be just developers. There's lots of innovative partnerships in some of the other corridors responding to these RFPs. And those innovative community partnerships are the type of things that can unlock something more rich than just a white box retail space, but more of a space that the community can take ownership in. So if there are community groups that you all think of or are a part of, definitely inquire more about this RFP.
Great, thank you, Matt. So a couple next steps. I know we're over, and I appreciate everyone's time so much. So we'll share the materials we talked about today with the group. I'll send out an email. We recorded the meeting, so we'll post that on YouTube probably tomorrow or maybe the next day, but I'll send an email when that's up if you want to go back. And then most important is we are going to plan another meeting like this to sort of follow up on our discussion in a month. So March 23rd. So that'll give us some time to talk about, to take in everything we heard today and sort of think about how that can translate into a possible development that we could put it into an RFP. So I'll of course send out emails again to everyone here about March 23rd, but just keep that in the back of your mind. If you have anything else you want to talk to us about, the DPD email address is dpd@cityofchicago.org. And I can put that in the chat as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. This is a great turnout, so I appreciate everyone sharing the word as well. And on we go. And you know, the other thing I just want to say is this is the beginning. We really want to continue these discussions. So thank you again. And please reach out, and we'll be sending emails with some follow-up information too. So thank you. And thank you so much to the CCAC team as well. So have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Awesome. Thanks again, Sheila. Hey, Cleopatra, what's up, girl? I owe you a call.